Welcome back to Humber. Well, the Tea Party crowd has called President Obama a socialist, a communist, and a Nazi. And now Democratic Congressman Steve Cohen of Tennessee compared the Tea Party movement itself to the KKK in a radio interview. Let's listen to it.
The Tea Party people are kind of like without robes and hoods. They have really shown a very hardcore, angry side of America that is against any type of diversity. And we saw opposition to African Americans, hostility toward gays, hostility to anybody who wasn't just, a clone of George Wallace's fan club. And I'm afraid they've taken over the Republican Party. I think it's cultural, and these people are ready to be led by the nose, and they're being led, and it's just to be against Barack Obama.
Well, we have Congressman Cohen joining us right now from Memphis. Sir, thank you for joining us. Give me your insights right up front here, because I'm a student of it as well, of the Tea Party crowd. Who are these people? How much of it is racial? How much of it is ideological? How much of it is rooted in organizations like, well, the Know Nothings, the KKK, etc.?
I think there's a lot of it, Chris. You know, on the health care vote, I walked on the mall among the protesters for at least a half an hour. I took my congressional badge off, had shades on, and walked around. It was a very homogeneous group. It was almost 99% white. I saw like minimal number of African Americans, Asians, Native Americans. The hatred that I saw exposed, calling Congressman John Lewis one of my heroes and Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, another friend, the N-word, and spitting on Emanuel Cleaver just disgusted me. And then the names they used for Barney Frank, and it showed a disregard. Now, not all Tea Party people obviously think that way, but when the leadership didn't say anything about it and object, the group becomes surety for the harmful words and actions that others took, comparing President Obama to Hitler and to a Nazi. And the party does look very bad when they don't stand up and say this was wrong and shameful.
Well, you know, I was in some anti-war demonstrations back in the Vietnam War era, and I remember the big march on the Pentagon, and although there were thousands and thousands of regular middle-of-the-road people there who just thought the war was a mistake, who weren't particularly ideological, college kids especially, there were also some old Reds there, some old liberals. I mean, not some old liberals, some old communists were in that group. Should the war demonstrators have demonstrated against them, these old-line lefties that had shown up to be under the umbrella? I mean, do you always, as members of a rally, have to take odds, to pick a fight with the oddballs that are in the group? I'm just giving you an argument here. You're saying that everybody in the group is responsible for everybody in the group, and I've never seen that standard applied before.
Well, you know, I think that not everybody, but you know, one of the main things the group was against health care. And Dr. King was assassinated in my hometown, Memphis, Tennessee, and we observed that horrific day with activities and remembrances this past weekend. Dr. King talked about health care being a right, and that one of the great inhumanities was not providing health care to people. Then you have this group 40 years later, almost entirely white, opposing the United States government in giving health care to making us the last industrialized country in the world to provide health care for its people. And it just doesn't seem like we've come that far. And reflecting on Dr. King, having been a proponent of health care and seeing the opposition to health care, which affects so many people, white and black, but a disproportionate amount of people who are black, it was just a flashback to an era. Jim Clyburn said he hadn't seen words expressed since the 60s by these groups.
Let me ask you,
and it seemed to be consistent.
There's some people out there on the right. I was listening to, I guess, Fox the other night, and they're denying, Laura Ingraham was sitting in for Bill O'Reilly, denying that there was any evidence. Of course, we had someone the other day, the voice recording left for John Lewis, which we all know about now, where the really racist language is on the record there. When you were out moving around on the crowd there, incognito, if you will, did you actually hear these epithets thrown at the black members of Congress and at Barney Frank for his orientation? Did you personally witness that?
I personally can't say I was, to be honest. I was listening to Stevie Guitar Miller on my iPod.
Yeah, so you can't witness that. Let me ask you about the issue of, well, let's take a look at some emails you've been getting. They've been turned over to the FBI. One reads, quote, if our Tea Parties had hoods, we would burn your expletive on a cross on the White House lawn, you total piece of, well, we can figure this stuff out. And another says, you looking son of a blah, blah, blah. It would be nice to read someone who had cut your something throat. Is this something that's new for you, or have you had to put up with this before? I mean, people in public life, I've gotten some of this over the years. I try not to get affected by it. Have you gotten this kind of real hate mail before, sir?
Not regularly, not very often, and this has been the most vitriolic. And, you know, we've gotten some other mail about my religion, and this doesn't reflect well at all either. Some lady called me the other day, and she was upset about my vote on health care, and she was a Tea Party person in my Tea Party statement, and she told me she was a 61-year-old lady with a disability. I asked her if she got her Social Security disability, and she did. She's living off of something that was provided through a Democratic Congress, and she doesn't understand. And the same words were used against Social Security and against Medicaid and against civil rights and voting rights, that this was a takeover, too much government, big government, and socialism and communism. It's American as apple pie now, and so will this health care bill be.
Yeah, I had a conservative dad. I lost him, but he was very much against government, but he sure liked Medicare when he got it. Let me ask you this. You're a white fella in a district that's largely black. Haven't you taken some heat for that? Isn't there some people who make prejudicial statements about that from the left, if you will?
Well, I guess there are some, but you know, my district is a wonderful district. It's a diverse district. It's predominantly African American. I get a lot of love in this district. I represent the district with the way they need to be represented. Our district needs health care, we need public education, we need social benefits, and we have been able to deliver on those, and our district has really overcome a lot. We've come a long way from the assassination of Dr. King and the days when the South was segregated. Memphis is on the rise.
What do you make of this sort of rise of the South? Not the good stuff either. This governor of Virginia, we were just talking about and arguing with Pat. I'll probably argue for months with this. Where he's talking about a proclamation glorifying the Confederacy, never mentions slavery. You've got Rick Perry down there in Texas and his opponents talking about secession and nullification and interposition. All this lingo that you and I studied in school that we thought was way back before the Civil War, it's all coming out again. Somebody's ripping the scab off this. Why are the Southern conservatives pushing the old fight again?
Well, I do think there's race involved in it, and it's because the parties are so separate and people play to their base. And the Democratic Party has most of the African American support and the Republicans don't, and they're just playing to their base. And it's unfortunate. You need leadership. And I think that the Chuck Percys, the Nelson Rockefellers, the Howard Bakers, the Bob Doles, that type of Republican isn't around anymore. And they need moderates who are within the Republican Party but not in leadership. And these people talking about secession, it sounds like nullification and interposition dripping off their lips. It's not the kind of language you need to bring America together. They talk about bipartisanship, and then they talk about meeting me at the state line or secession. These aren't the type of words you hear, and you don't hear them in Congress. And it's impossible to have bipartisanship when one party just says no, 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 and kill the bill. The whole idea of kill the bill was difficult. I was out on the balcony at the Capitol, and the verbiage and the vitriol was on this. It was so strong. You knew if they got that they'd want. They had ill feelings toward anybody that voted for the bill, and the tempers got so great. And it just, you know, I'd been to Birmingham, to Montgomery, and to Selma with John Lewis on the Civil Rights Pilgrimage 3 weeks earlier. We visited the 16th Street Church when the hate got such that 4 young women were bombed and killed. We saw the Edmund Pettus Bridge and went there where the government oppressed people who tried to start a voting rights march. And to see this language again and this attitude, and there is an undercurrent of race because Obama, Sotomayor, Rahm Emanuel, Eric Holder, there is an upset to it. This didn't start with George Bush and Dick Cheney, who had the biggest budget deficits ever. They didn't care. Okay. The biggest budget deficit reduction bill ever was the health care bill, and yet they were against it. Okay. This does not make sense except for the parties.
Well, thank you, Rich. I do like the fact that you represented Martin Luther King's words when you said their lips dripping with words like nullification. You have a good memory for Dr. King's words. Thank you so much to Congressman Steve Cohen of Memphis. Up next, did Arlen Specter forget he's now a Democrat? It does get a little confusing, Senator, occasionally for you, but we got to remind you of what party you're in right now. Check out that. It's coming up in the sideshow. It's very funny. Hardball coming back on MSNBC.